Hi, good afternoon. This side Moin from Magneq software. So today I'll be explaining the roadmap for .NET, what technologies that fresher interns need to learn to become a full stack developer. So what are the modules that are majorly plays a role for developing .NET, any applications. So as a .NET, most of the freshers will be dealing with web applications development. So to develop web applications using .NET technologies, what are the modules that a fresher intern need to be aware. So on that particular thing, I have planned to give a roadmap. So I request, hopefully you will be understanding the concept. Okay. So normally to design a web page or to design any web applications, most of the case we will be using a front-end technologies. So first of all, we will be designing the front-end pages. So for example, let us consider this is a login page that you are trying to design. So to design a login page or to design any registration page or any UI content or any the front end where user gets interact. So to design this particular controls, so in .NET, a fresher intern need to be aware of the technologies called HTML, CSS and Bootstrap. So first of all, everyone should be aware that what is HTML, what is CSS, what are the tags that we use in that particular HTML, what properties we will be using, what is Bootstrap framework. So if we are aware of HTML, CSS and Bootstrap, then definitely we can able to design the front-end pages. So every web page will be making use of HTML, CSS and Bootstrap for designing the front-end part. So for example, let us consider I have designed this web page using HTML, CSS and Bootstrap. Now whenever after designing the web page, as we enter the data, for example, let us consider this is a login page. We are trying to read the data or we are trying to put the data into a database through create page. So when we enter the data here, for example, I'm entering data. So once I click the submit button, so where my data will be going, where my data is getting saved. If you take any real-time applications like Facebook, LinkedIn, all these are the real-time applications where we interact on daily basis. So when we create a new account through Facebook or LinkedIn or any other web application, so where our data is getting saved, that is the thing that we need to understand. So most of the cases our data will be saved on a server machine. It's nothing but a cloud where data will be stored. So for storing this data on a cloud, for storing this data on a servers, we have many providers, we have many relational databases. So one of the most commonly used relational database for .NET applications will be Microsoft SQL Server. So Microsoft SQL Server is one of the relational database for storing the data. So if we are aware of what is SQL Server, what are the commands that we have in SQL Server, then it will be helpful for you to perform our database transaction where we can store and where we can manipulate the data. So our design is ready and we have know how to insert the data into a database with the help of SQL. Now for example, our UI is at client side and server is at remote place. See, when we are as a client, I'm sitting in my place and I'm trying to connect with Facebook server, I'm trying to connect with LinkedIn server. So where is that server? We don't know. Still we are communicating with that server. So we need to understand who is responsible for that communication, who is transferring that particular data. So client to server, server to client, who is responsible for that connectivity. So in .NET, we will be making use of a technology called ADO.NET. It's basically a library which contains set of classes which helps us to communicate with the database. So ADO.NET is one of the library in .NET which helps us to communicate with the databases. So in that same way, we have another tool in .NET called Entity Framework. So that Entity Framework technology is also used for communicating with the data sources. So ADO.NET also helps us to connect with the databases. Entity Framework also connects with data sources. So if you are aware of these two technologies, we can able to perform a database transaction. Now when I say ADO.NET and Entity Framework as a tool or a technology, it is not a hardware part where we need to install in a PC. It's a business logic. And ADO.NET and Entity Framework is nothing but a business logic which is written in a programming language, and the programming language is nothing but C#. So every business logic in any technologies, they'll be using a programming language. But here in .NET, most of the cases we will be going with C#.NET. So C#.NET is one of the high level of programming language which follows OOP structure, which follows object oriented, and which this technology helps us to. So it's a programming language which performs the business logic, and ADO.NET library which is written in a C#.NET a programming language. So we have learned how to design the page, we know how to store the data, we know how to connect the data. Then finally, to perform all these things, designing, writing code, all these things is done in a framework called ASP.NET. So in .NET, to design a web application, Microsoft has come up with a framework called ASP.NET. ASP.NET is one of the framework where we can able to develop the web applications by using HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, SQL Server, where we can make use of ADO.NET, where we can make use of programming languages like C#. It's a framework which helps us to develop the web application. So specifically, we can make use of ASP.NET as a framework for developing a web application. Again, Microsoft has updated its version for developing a web application. That is nothing but, so initially it was a framework, then Microsoft has come up with ASP.NET MVC. Then now currently in the market, Microsoft is running ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET MVC Core. All these are the frameworks which helps us to develop the web application. So to develop a web application, it is mandatory that we should be aware of these minimum these 4 technologies: designing, storing data, connecting data with any high level of programming language. And finally, with the help of this framework, we will be able to develop the web application. So as a developer, if you see, many programmers, many developers will be working on a single project. So that single project is deployed on a server. So to deploy this particular project on a server, we can make use of Azure. So there are a lot of providers where we can deploy our application. Azure is one of the service. Azure is providing a lot of services where we can deploy the application. In that same way, we have AWS. We have a lot of services where we can deploy our application. So Azure is one of the service. Azure is which we can deploy our application. But after developing the application, before deploying, all the code will be collected at one place into a repo, and that repo is nothing but GitHub. See, many programmers will be working on one project, and that project will be deployed into a cloud, and that cloud is nothing but Azure. So the code is collected from these programmers in a form of, so all the code will be pushed into a repo, and that repo is nothing but a GitHub. So GitHub acts as a central directory where the code is collected from all the different programmers. From that particular repo, your code is then deployed into a Azure. So these are the minimum technologies that we should be aware to become a .NET developer, where we need to able to design the front-end pages, we should be able to perform the database logics, we should able to perform the database connectivity with the help of our programming languages, and we should able to know how the frameworks works, what is MVC, what is ASP.NET, how to use how to develop a web applications, testing, debugging. All these things is done in ASP.NET framework, MVC and MVC work. Then finally, all the code is collected into a central repo that is nothing but GitHub, and from that GitHub, the code is then deployed into a cloud that is nothing but Azure. So these are the minimum technologies that one should be aware of it. So apart from that, if we are aware of web APIs, how to develop a web API, if we are aware of Angular, so it will be a additional part in your career. But these are the minimum technologies that one as a fresher intern should be aware of it. So I hope you have understood the content.